Hello and welcome to another video on the React Native. And in today's video, I'm going to take a quick recap of what I have learned so far, especially with the React Native Intro, a course that is taught by Kadi Kraman. Shout out to Kadi Kraman. She is a software developer that has a mathematical background, and she works at Formidable, a social first creative agency, as director of engineering mobile services, and currently she is working as a software developer at Expo, right? So that's great because with that we can open up ourselves as a way to understand uh, her background and what is the goal of this course, which is help us to understand how we can build React Native applications, the mental model behind that, as well as the things that separate React from React Native. Okay, this course is for JavaScript developers that are new to React Native, uh, and they need to actually keep up the pace or learn new things with React Native for any contractors or for the company. And as a way to make yourself more familiar with this, it's important to know that a little bit of things, which is the thing that you need to is, well, a Mac or Linux or Windows, as well as a mobile device, a mobile phone, whether it's an iPhone or Android. Or you can even run or emulate then your device. So the point of doing this is that, especially now that you know this basic stuff that you need to, what is React Native? So because these mobile devices now has over 100,000 times more processing power, uh, at least a lot of mobile devices back in 2020, and 1 million times more memory RAM than the guided computer on Apollo 11 that landed the first human on the moon. So with this, the idea here is by recognizing that this device and all the power, even though their interface is a small and has a small touch screen, and their interaction is quite, or the way of how you can browser on the web is suboptimal, even though people still using that, and you can find in the marketplace or in the the mobile iOS market share that Android and iOS dominate that. So according to the GS Stat Counter website, it says that, well, 70% of mobile devices, mobile OS, the devices use is um, Android, whereas 28.46% of them use iOS. So if you want to now target the vast audience here, you know that you have to go with Android and iOS. And because of that, you find yourself that you have now is the two different workflows, two different code bases, two different development teams, and that is very, very annoying. Is to keep track of all of these things, especially on different code sets, because now you also need to know is, for example, if you are developing on Android, you need to learn Java or Kotlin, as well as if you're learning is iOS, you need to, or if you're developing for iOS platform, you need to learn is Object-C or Swift as a way to create these applications. But because of this workflow, some people, some companies like Facebook decide to have decide to have a decide to have a go at solving it. Decide to have a go at solving it. So because of that, the React Native born. So the goal of React Native is to say, hey, not only for React Native, but other tools out there that wants to aim the same purpose. It's like I'm going to have this one code base, one language, one workflow with one development team that allow us to easily extend the functionality of my application. So if you see yourself, for example, with the product mindset right now for a moment, if this is your product, you want to make your product as fast as possible and easy, improve the developer experience when it comes to actually build this kind of application. So because of that, all right, one of the benefits, despite it being backed by Facebook, is also that is now if you need to build native applications, it will look like indistinguishable or this real native application. Uh, and if you want to now get into this native code, for example, to build specific uh, features to any of these platforms, whether it is the Android or iOS, you can easily do that by creating a plugin and then so first actually dive into the native code and then into creating a React Native wrapper that works on any of these two devices. So that's also part of the trade-off, okay? Because, well, if you are developing now React native application with JavaScript, so you might end up having sometimes to need to go in a little bit of the Object-C or the Swift as a way to create particular features. Again, this is one of the things that when Kadi was asked about where she find ways that you need to or when do you find yourself in a situation where you would like to ditch this React Native things. It means that when it comes to be quite annoying, and there are two scenarios at least that she mentioned is when you have to integrate with third-party libraries such as the email providers, or when you have to create a new payment service, when you need to get support to a payment provider, and that's great. That's quite interesting because it is also part of the pain points. But you must know when, for example, any PM actually asks you to do that, you are ready uh, for the battle. You might consider what will come next, and that is pain. Okay, that's good. That's great because the other question was okay. So which features do we need to stay away do performance issue because React Native team developed is a particularly JavaScript engine for that, which is called Hermes. Hermes. In theory, there shouldn't be any problem using that. So that leads us to say, okay, but how now then React Native works? What is the architecture? So it is built to target specific platform compilers. So the way how they do that is by talking to one of these existing compilers, and presumably generating is the input needed for this compiler, whether it's for the Android or for the iOS, and then let those compilers do what they do great, which is building applications on their specific platform, or aka the artifacts. All right, so that was a great overview of what React Native is, as well as some other things, especially if you're new to React Native, like Expo. So, what is Expo? If you're new to this, don't worry. Expo is a suite of tools built for and around React Native. So, with this is all about improving the developer experience. And that's quite frankly something that I really love about Expo, because it exactly did that. I already made some couple of exercise here, an example here as a way to understand Expo. And the only trade-off of Expo, or one of the limitation of Expo, unlike React Native, is like if that feature is not implemented in Expo, you will have to go by your own to implement that. So yeah, based on the Kadi experience, she mentioned that anytime she started to build a production grade application in React Native, she started with Expo, and then he ended up uh, ejecting that application. Which means is to convert your Expo app into a vanilla React Native app, and that's not that hard, by the way. It can only be quite a little bit more uh, time consuming in setup things, that kind of thing. But yeah, I also look at one of the other features that Expo has, like the EAS, which is the Expo Application Service, and how this EAS is quite frankly something that you would like to take a look, because it comes with this development process, as well as the Expo router, Expo models, and the Expo application servers, which allow you to integrate your Expo and React Native applications with cloud-based service. Yeah, there is a lot of jargon here, I must admit, a lot of jargon here. Uh, but the thing here is that, especially if you're getting started with building your React Native application, I will invite you to go to the documentation as a way to make sense of all of this concept, what it is, get yourself familiar with, and understand that when you're going to develop your application, especially your React Native application, you must work on the same network. Uh, so since your JavaScript bundle is built exactly. Since your JavaScript bundle is built and sent over the local Wi-Fi, this is a way how they streamline this particular process. These things of adding a linter, as well as the debugging, is something that is going to help you a lot in improving the developer experience, as a way to get your code or the integrated the ID, help you with the auto formatting and code recommendation, code linters. So yeah, we use the ESLint as a way to say, hey, let's going to use now this configuration from React Native community. And the prettier is perhaps some configuration that you might want to use, or you can reuse the pre-existing configurations of any project. And when it comes now to the real thing that actually is what matter for us as a developer, to say, hey, this is what we're going to end up doing it, okay? And that is uh, debugging. Most of the time, we are going to is so the task of a software developer is to not only to design systems, but also to debug their application and read through a lot of code. All right, that's great. That's quite interesting. So reload and debugger actually is the main two features that we're going to use here. That was interesting. Very, very interesting. Right now I'm going to open up the React Native here. Debugging. Okay, exactly. Debugging basics. That's right. And there you go. Debugging basic and accessing the dev menu here, which is something that is honestly quite interesting and powerful. Okay. All right. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. So now let's go into the basic components. Right now I'm gonna watch the course in a separate video tab, and I'm gonna take notes of what Kadi described.
With React, this will be super. First off, let's look at what a component looks like. If you're already familiar with React, this will be super familiar with you. But if you're less familiar with React or you've never used it, we're just going to recap. This is an example of a React component as you would find them on the web. Let's look at this in detail. First, we have the React import, we got a little constant function, and then we got an export. Notice that here we're using a div, and this looks suspiciously like HTML on the web. Is actually what's called JSX, which stands for JavaScript and XML. But you can pretty much think of it as HTML that you can write JavaScript in. It's really handy because you can make your code completely dynamic. The React import, you'll notice that we're not actually using React inside this component anywhere, but as a rule of thumb, if you're using anything that has these tiny braces, which is JSX, you'll have to import React. Now, let's look at the corresponding React Native component. They are actually pretty similar, but one thing that you might notice as a difference is that we have these new components, view and text, which we import directly from React Native. Now, one difference between React and React Native is that whereas in React we have some JSX elements that are the same as HTML elements like the p tag or div or span or button, we'll have them available just magically globally. Whereas in React Native, every single thing has to be imported.
Exactly. I think that this is very, very okay. React or how do you put it? Yeah, you can talk about is tags, HTML tag, which is something very, very important. HTML tag and HTML tag and versus UI mobile tags. Okay, so if we take a look now at this, which is UI interaction, style, height, layout, and now this is workflow using the libraries, Metro, UI interaction, style, height, image, color reference, layout with Flexbar. Oh, we can use Flexbar for layout. Interesting. Handling touches, navigating between screen, animation. Okay, this is now interactions. connectivity. Okay, that's quite interesting. Okay, so this is debugging basics. Testing, which is very, very, very important, uh, is the fun, the thing that everybody loves doing testing. Performance overview, exactly, and native models like this, as well as native components. Android native UI components, direct manipulations. Okay, and Android and iOS guides for that. Okay, and iOS, that kind of thing, and Android, that kind of thing. Okay, your experimental. Okay, cool, cool. So, I think it's this exactly. I think it's explaining is this view and mobile development, core components and native components. React Native is an open source for building Android and iOS application using React. And you can learn more about this views and mobile development, native components and core components. Um, React components, React Native components, community components, core components, your native components, and that kind of thing. Okay, but again, the idea here is that exactly okay because with React Native you use JavaScript to access your platform APIs exactly as well as to describe the appearance and behavior of your UI using React components, bundles of reusable, nestable code. So the idea here is that because with React Native you can have you use JavaScript to access to the JavaScript APIs. I think this is quite frankly very very important. Okay. HTML tags and you can say is uh, JavaScript APIs. Okay, I would like to split this into that JavaScript API and this. So in React, so in React Native, you use exactly. So in React Native, okay. So in React Native, you use how do you put it here? Exactly. So in React Native here, yep. So in React Native, you use JavaScript to access to native API, okay, or to platform API to access to your which is that to access to your platforms API, right? That's what it is. That's what you do. In React Native, you use JavaScript to access to your platform's API. Okay? In okay, as well as to describe the appearing of behavior. Okay. You also use and you well, exactly. So when it comes to describe the appearance and behavior, when it comes to describe the appearance and behavior, the appearance and behaviors. Okay, when it comes to describing appearance and behaviors, we use React. Okay, unlike exactly. So unlike React web-based or unlike React on the web, where we can have access globally to HTML tag. Okay. Now in React Native, we have to import everything. We have to import everything. And this is something interesting because once you're able to understand what is happening behind the scenes, and by that is like, okay, but how all of this works and why is this? Because we're using is the browser or the Android or iOS as a way to say, hey, you have is this small set of tools, pretty much like when you download your mobile phone, you have is from the if you do a hardware reset or yeah, if you do a reset from factory or you get a new phone, you know that you have small tools to use, right? Small set of you tools to use. And this is pretty much when you are trying to work with the browser as well as the HTML, as well as the Android and iOS. They provide you as a set of tools that allow you to do things. So you can think of this as they provide you is this set of ingredients so you can create your own recipes. Okay, and in this particular case, React on the web, they provide you is a, out of the box and globally all of this ingredient, all of these HTML elements to render, as well as how all of these elements will behave there. That's one. And the other is the UI mobile tags or the UI mobile features, tags and features. Okay, so here is because now those particular platforms say, hey, this is what you can use. This is what I allow you to use. Okay, this is your toolbox. Now we need to import everything here. It's not globally, which if you can think this actually, when it comes to develop your mental model, is way much more easy to understand that hey, this come from this come from this. Much more way to map that, so you reduce the cognitive load from that. All right, that was quite interesting though.
The other thing we'll notice is that we've used a view here for a container, and then we have this text component which doesn't exist on the web. In React Native, whenever you want to display any text, it has to be wrapped inside a text element, otherwise you'll get an error. If you've done old-timey programming where you have these MVC patterns, and you might be used to thinking of views as these one big like container component or like a single page. This is not actually the case. You can pretty much think views to be equivalent to divs on the web. You can use them for containing things, for positioning, for
Interesting. So for example, view component. Okay, view UI. Okay, and here is when it comes to the UI. React Native. React Native. UI React Native. And that is, well, exactly. And that is React Native from that.
you don't need to worry about using too many div elements as well.
So you got Vue. You can use it pretty much like this on the web. Okay. For positioning elements and that kind of thing. mentioning element and that kind of thing. Okay.
Because React Native in the compile step automatically compresses the divs that don't have any visible styles. Now we're going to introduce three components. We got our view, which is basically like a div. We got a scroll view, which is a div but it scrolls.
Okay, we got now scroll div, scroll view, exactly, scroll view, which is a div that scroll.
So content doesn't automatically scroll in React Native. If there's anything that needs to have scroll action, you need to use a scroll view instead of a view.
Okay, because content doesn't scroll automatically. Okay, this is part of the restriction of this, and part of the designers of these components. And then you have text.
And finally, a text. A text component is used for displaying any text and all text. So if you don't use a text element and you put some text in, you get an error. Right, well, let's get coding. So regardless of whether you're using Expo or not, go into your app.js and then just delete everything. You get an error. And we're going to start from scratch. The first thing you do is we import React. This is basically the first thing you do in every single React component. Now what we're going to do is we're going to import the React Native elements that we're going to use. We're going to import view,
Which is view
and text.
and text. Okay.
React Native. Now I always use constant functions, especially nowadays when there's no need for class functions. So let's do a new constant called app. So this is basically the template for a const. And now the next thing I usually do is I also export it. Export default app. Right, so now we've got a little template run the piece of rendering, and that's because we haven't actually added anything visible here. So let's do a return, and let's return a view. And inside that view, you can see that there's already no error, which is great. We'll add a text. Error. Now notice that this text gets rendered way at the top of the screen. This is not what we want. And you might be tempted to add some padding at the top of the screen to get around this, but that's not actually a great thing to do because this will work on this iPhone 11 emulator I have. But what about if you use an Android? See how this looks on Android as well. Yeah, so in Android it doesn't actually look that bad because the screen starts from the top. But thankfully there is a component that helps us get around this. It's called Safe Area View. So let's import Safe Area View as well. And then let's just wrap the whole thing in a Safe Area View. Cool. And you'll notice that the content automatically gets rendered just below our notification bar. And in Android, it already works, so there's no change.
Okay, that was quite interesting. So here now, let's get me remove all of this, right? Yep, that's going to remove this. And here we don't need actually to import anything with React. That's interesting. That's interesting. So the thing here is that here we're going to import this. Okay. So now you're going to come with me and to coding. This is the code that we have before, all right, with some style and that kind of thing. But the idea here is to say, hey, let's going to get rid of this. So first thing first, you might sometimes perhaps have React Native on any component. You say, hey, give me is the React library completely. Okay. In new versions, you don't need to actually do that because they must have come by default. All right. And then you wanted to do, even though ChatGPT is actually out, tell me some recommendations, some suggestions, but since right now I am on React Native, I have to say, hey, import, but from React Native. Okay, so couple components. First is the view, which is pretty much like the div on the web, as well as text. Okay, and if I move on to creating is this application, okay, I can say, hey, I want you to export this function as default, but I might also quite used to do the cons nature. So for example, like app, something like that, and then is when you're gonna say, hey, because this is telling us to do this, look at the recommendation here is like, hey, I want you to create now this text hello world for us, which is great, which is great. uh, and now if we export this, we say export uh, default, default app. Okay. And now if we want to actually take a look at our app on the mobile phone, okay, we can see that it actually prints is hello world. Uh, so that's interesting. It was quite powerful. Hello world. However, because we are now in different environments, uh, and this is why you actually need a lot of React Native developers end up having a Mac because of that. So, because sometimes when you are doing that kind of development here, especially if you want to make some safe assumptions where you're going to display the text, you might want to use some particular components called safe area view. One of the beautiful thing of this is that it actually autocomplete that. So have it only have impact on iOS most likely.
And you know how I said that you have to use a text element to display text? Now let's see what happens if you don't. React Native will immediately tell you that you're doing something wrong. The error messages in React Native are actually really good, so if you end up getting an error, just reading the error message usually guides you to the solution.
The other is
In
styling.
React Native, all styling is done via inline styles. So there are problems with like cascading
Okay,
style sheets where things override things and there's order of priority. None of that. You can forget about that. It's not even a choice, which is actually great. Like cascading
okay,
style. In React Native, all styling is done via inline style.
interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Styling, styling. So in React Native, all styling are done. Uh, all stylings are wait what? Because all stylings are done by by inline style, which you can forget about how. Okay, that's interesting. You can forget about how uh, You can forget about CSS cascading effect. That doesn't that doesn't have any effect. Okay, great. Oh,
So there are problems with like cascading style sheets where things override things and there's order of priority. None of that. You can forget about that. It's not even a choice, which is actually great. To create styles, we use a style sheet element, which is in React Native. So we import it from here. And then we basically create our styles object. I usually create it at the bottom of the file just before the export. Let's do const styles.
okay. Katie create the style uh, at the bottom of the file, where you can import from style sheet where you can import from where you can import style sheet from React Native. So she mentioned this is a style. She created this object, I'm assuming.
Style sheet.
Dot create, okay.
And then you pass it an object.
Alright.
And let's add one style. Let's add a style to the container. Let's do margin. Oh, and you'll notice that obviously it's not applied yet, and that's because we haven't actually added it to
Added to that.
You can style pretty much any component using the style prop. So let's add this to our view. Let's go to the view and there's style, equals styles dot container. Now this styles object pretty much creates a normal object, and you can access any attribute in this object using the dot notation. And you notice that our content now has a handful of border around it. I'm going to add some background color so you can see what it looks like. Right. So one of the things that you find yourself doing quite often in native is adding margins left and right, or top and bottom. So for example, you might want to have margin top be 10, margin bottom. Let's do padding so you can see them.
Exactly.
Right, so we've got top and bottom padding 10, padding left. Let's do this 30.
You have two padding
So
left.
we've got all the padding that we wanted, but this is like 4 lines of styles, which is pretty tedious. If you're familiar with web development, you'll know that on web there's a convenience method that you can use. You could just do like padding 10, 30. We can't do this in React Native. Instead, we have horizontal and vertical tops. So instead of padding top and padding bottom, I can do padding vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. And padding.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually works with both padding and margin. That's quite handy. In general, you might have noticed that these styles are similar to the web styles. The difference being that the native styles don't have any units. They are unitless. I think they correspond to density independent pixels. Yeah, so I kind of like the design. If I use designs for React Native, the designs often have pixels, but obviously this won't work. So Like in my head, I still think of them as pixels, but you don't need to write units, which is good. The other thing is, so I had
Okay, that was quite a lot. By the way, the styling here is like let's me to create the object here. So she creates this object here. We say, hey, Jasper, I want you to now save space for this thing called style. Okay, and I want you to get this from style sheet, and I want you to create this. No, create this. And you need to pass this as an object. The question is that do you import that, the style sheet? You need to import that from React Native. Okay, and here is where you can pass is some of this property. Because most of the time, god damn, okay, which is this, right? So this is our current folder here, or current file, by the way, app.jsx. Oh, this is an app.js. Okay, this is quite interesting. App.js. Um, because usually in React Native development, uh, we tend to use a lot of padding. We tend to use a lot of padding and margin. There are some convenient ways to do that. Uh, Unlike convenient ways to do that, and unlike the web, this doesn't have any values, or this doesn't have any unit. Those units represent
pixels, but obviously this won't work. So
density independent pixel. Density independent features. Okay. No, density independent pixel, which is unique. Yeah, which is unique. Therefore, you don't need to specify them. That makes a lot of sense. So here on that we can say, hey, I want you to now padding or horizontal padding. Oh, you need to have is the container object. Oh, as a way to encapsulate all of those property here, the container, and here what you say is padding. Exactly, makes a lot of sense. Padding horizontal like this, padding vertical. I'm not sure if we're using is that padding vertical is 10 and padding horizontal is 30, and we need to actually add that to this, which is on the view. You say, hey, this style property, exactly, we're going to add this. So we're going to add this thing called styles. Okay, style will be equal to style. Okay, style dot container. This is how you tell now GSX, hey, this is actually the container we want to add. It actually throws an error. It say, hey, view, why you throw this error? Move to a new file. Why do you want to move to a new file?
Yeah, so I kind of like the design. If I use designs, data props and image props can have it onto and like for some padding.
Why do you want me to do this? Move to a new file. Move to file. Anyway, we actually added that, and the other is the background color, which is teal. All right, that's interesting.
Padding left. Let's do this. The native is image props, style props that you can use. This list is not actually comprehensive. Um, Basically, most web styles will work in React Native. The difference is that on the web, you might you have to use the dash notation, but here we just use camel case. And the other note is like on the web, whenever there's a convenience function, for example, for borders, you might do border 1 pixel solid and then the color. In native, you have to do border, like they're all like separate. So you have to do border, bottom, actually just do border color. Border, yeah, got a little border here. Yeah, so you have to write them out separately. The other thing to note is that all positioning in native applications is done using Flexbox. So if you've never used Flex or like you've heard of it and not really gotten into it,
Okay, another interesting topic, which is very interesting. So,
this is the time because there's no other way. If you want to, you can use it's done using Flexbox.
native application is done using Flexbox.
So yeah, so you have to write them out separately. The other thing to note is that all position.
For example, in the case of border of color. So border color is equal to pink. Why you do that? It's equal to pink. Again, then you say, hey, I want you to now. Oh my god, you're quite annoying, quite annoying, quite annoying. Border with one, and we were able to see that little goddamn border color pink. Yes. Okay. And the other thing that she mentioned, the other is
So you
positioning.
have to write them out separately. The other thing to note is that all positioning in native applications is done using Flexbox.
Exactly. The other is positioning. Uh, positioning, 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 positioning. So positioning, mm-hmm, and the style sheet object. That's interesting. And the positioning, all positioning is done by Exactly. All positioning is done. Okay. All positioning is done using Flexbox 2024. At least at at least in 2024.
Little frogs in the low leaves, and it kind of introduces you all the effects. The elements that use style is positioning itself. With flex, you apply styles to the containing element, and then the containing element positions the children inside. One thing we might want to do is we might want to just position this text at the center of the screen. That would be quite handy.
Well, you add this flex, you indicate that, hey, this element is flex, and then you say justify content.
Center. Cool. So now we've centered text horizontally. That was pretty easy. Now, in order to center text vertically, we use justify content. But you notice that this doesn't work. The reason that this doesn't work is because it centers the content like inside the current element. We can see the current element is exactly the same height as the content. So in order to do that, we need to make the containing elements the full width of the screen.
Exactly.
So it was pointed out that the text is not very visible, so let's make the background pink instead. You can see the text. That's better. Right, so we want to be able to center this content this way, horizontally. And the way we want to make our content full width of the screen. And the way we basically do this is use flex one. And this basically means that, make this content the same height as the content that is its parent. And this actually makes the text disappear. You might be going, what's going on? But let's look at our component tree. We'll notice that we have this safe area view that is containing our component. And this doesn't have any properties. So all we'll need to do is we need to give this a flex property as well. So now, if this...
That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. And also, this is where I think a lot of people, when they are in the positioning on element, they barely know about this. When working exact, Flexbox Froggy, which is this. So if you're unfamiliar, you can play with it. Okay, you can play with it here. Okay, but when you want us to actually say something like this, so Flex is telling, hey, you know what? If this content has entirely, so you can say is align, no justify content in, or aligns items, or flex in. But as you can see, this is what you can do, right? But the idea here is to make yourself familiar with that. And when you do things like flexbox here,
Flex, you have to do display. Cool. So now we've centered text horizontally. That was pretty easy. Now, in order to center text vertically, we use justify content. But you notice that this doesn't work. The reason this way, here, you might be going, what's going on? But let's look at our component tree. We'll notice that we have this safe area view that is containing our component, and this doesn't have any properties. So all we'll need to do is we need to give this a flex property as well. So now,
so that to me is something interesting because with flex here, especially when you say flex one, flex one is saying, hey, I'm going to inherit is whatever is on the style here. And as a way to do that is by passing is this property called flex one. As a way to inherit that. You know what I mean? That was pretty interesting. And if you want to actually is okay. I think we can preserve is the padding in our case. And if you want to preserve that, which is with background align there's okay. Background with align items center. And then this is if you want to give them align items is if you want to give vertical positioning and justify content when you want to give them let me see if that right exactly align items is when you're gonna give this vertical positioning and justify content here justify content is say hey I'm going to position now this horizontally as you can see that's great.
this is flex 1. So if you want to use flex 1, you need to make sure that all the components all the way up to the component tree are using flex 1 as well, otherwise it won't work. And the other thing you might notice that I've done is I've used a style property without actually using the style sheet. So that is a thing you can do. It's not really recommended because style sheet optimizes the properties and kind of caches them. But sometimes you have to do this in order to have dynamic styles like colors or dynamic widths or something. So I could also do safe area x2 and this is a good one. The other thing that you can do is sometimes you might want
Okay, so you might want to use this. So you might want to use this style sheet created here for optimization. So for example, you can say, hey, this is the name of the style, safe area view, safe area view,
yeah,
or safe area with the view, safe area. Okay, and then you say flex. Of course, it will throw an error. That's right. And you can say safely now access to the style dot safe area and back to work. Okay, that was quite interesting. That was quite interesting. Totally man. Totally man.
and this is a good one. The other thing that you can do is sometimes you might want to have multiple styles. You might have shared style.
Okay. So so flex one is indicating that give me the height of whatever, you give me the height of whatever parent, you give me the height of my parent. Like this. It's indicating that it gives me the height of my parent element. Exactly. It's indicating to give me the height of my parent element. Flex one. It's indicating to give me the height to give me the height of my parent element. That's all. Pretty much it's like that. Pretty much is like that. Okay. So our aware of style sheet object. React Native React Native community advise to use the object for performance and caching reasons. Good to that. Move on.
Style sheets that you might want to apply both of them, but like not combine into one. There's actually a built-in way to do this. Instead of passing in a single style, you can actually pass in an array of styles. So suppose that we wanted to have the background color style separately. I'm just going to create a style called pink. And then I'm going to move this background color into here. And then we're going to convert this style prop into an array. And the first element of the array is the container, and then the second one is, and now they're both going to get applied. One thing to note is that these will cascade, hopefully, so that if the container had, for example, red, and this had pink, then the pink will override the red. This is similar to the web. Whereas I think if I had them the other way around, if I had them the other way around, it would be a very jarring red. And just a side note, some of you might have used style components before. Style components actually have a React Native compatible module. So if you want to write your native styles exactly the same as you write your style components, like web frontend, you can actually do it. Like they work exactly the same. The only difference is that here you have a style div, and here we have a style view.
If you're a fan of all style components, you might be excited to know that they have React Native support. Style native elements looks pretty much the same on the web, only instead of this. Style div, style.div, and the background. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
for this workshop, and you can use snake case like styles as well, so they'll look like the web ones. Yeah, for this workshop, we'll be using just the plain built-in styles, but just to note that this is something that you can do. So just a quick recap, we need to use style sheet create for all the styles. All the styles are pretty much what you would expect from the web. If you're not sure, you can try them, and a lot of the time they'll work. The difference is that you don't use units, so all the things that you would have normally as pixel values, you will have just number values. All the colors, you can use all the web colors that are available that are named, and you can also use hex colors, RGB or RGBA. All the positioning is done using flex. So you will have to use flex for all position if you want to center anything, if you want to put anything in a row. And you can pass in styles directly without using a style sheet if need be, but you should avoid it when possible.
Exactly.
And finally, you can have multiple styles in one component by passing in an array instead of an individual style.
Exactly. You can pass. Okay. So here, multiple style per component as an array. Okay, that's interesting. That was very, 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 very goddamn very, very interesting. But very, 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 yeah, okay, very interesting. Do you have any, like, exactly, here, much better. Basic components, basic React Native component styling, WS time. Okay. 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 Styling exercises, la la la, and then you got it here, which is the styling. Okay. I love it. I love it. I love it here. Okay. Alright. So that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye. Or before that, I can think I can take a look at another one.
Now you've had an introduction into how styling works in React Native, and it's time to start learning by doing. So using all the information that you got from the previous chapter, here's a styling exercise. I've created some colorful boxes. Got a cyan, blue, magenta, and an orange box with some white text. And here are the colors that I used. And using all the information we had from the previous chapter, try to replicate this UI. So we had a couple of questions come out about fonts. So on the web, you could just set one font for the whole application. And the question was whether you could do the same on React Native. Unfortunately, you can't because we use inline styles. We have to explicitly set the font for every single element. On big applications, there's a couple of ways that you can share styles. Either you will have a global shared style sheet that you can import styles from to your individual components, or you can just have a text component that you reuse in every single place. So usually you figure out a one place to set the font, but then that thing is used in multiple components. Alright, let's look at the solution for this styling exercise. Right, so first thing we have some text. Here are some boxes of different colors. So I'm going to edit the text.
Especially for fonts. Especially for fonts. Especially for fonts. Especially for fonts. That's interesting. Especially for fonts. Very, very interesting. Okay. So when we talk about font, right? Especially here. So when we talk about font, okay, which is font, exactly, which is styling solution, okay, which is font, all right, which is font, okay, font, uh, yeah, font here. Um, if you want to use multiple fonts in your app,
In styles, use inline styles, we have to explicitly set the fonts for every single element.
exactly. If you want to use multiple fonts in your app, you have to unfortunately tell to each in individual component. Yeah. If you want to use multiple fonts in your app, you have to unfortunately tell to each individual component. Mhm.
On big applications, there's a couple of ways that you can share styles. Either you will have a global shared style sheet.
Okay, tell individual components. On big apps, you can have a one share big style sheet, and here we go, style sheet.
That you can import styles from
Yeah, that you can import styles from.
to your individual components, or you can just have a text component that you reuse in every single place.
Okay, on big apps, exactly, on big apps you can have one share. You can have uh, for example, so one share big style, one share big style sheet that you can import from style, or one text component, for example, or one component, text component, for example. So text component, for example, exactly. One share big style that you can import style from, and one component, text component, for example, that you can reuse.
Usually you figure out a one place to set the font, but then that thing is used in multiple. Have a text component that you reuse in every single.
hmm that you reuse in every single place.
Place. So usually you figure out a one place to set the font, but then that thing is used in multiple components. Alright, let's look at the solution for this styling exercise. Alright, so first thing we have some text. Here are some boxes of different colors. So I'm going to edit the text. Because I got rid of styles for the view, our text is good. And I think I'm going to add some padding to the top as well, because this isn't at the top of the screen. Now, because this is just an area that you want to style, the only thing to use really is a view. So I'm going to just add a view here, and I'm going to add some text inside. And let's go with text here is centered. Remember, the way we center things is using flex, and need to add, in order to center this, we need to add style to its container. So we need to go to cyan box and tell the box that we want it content inside it to be always centered. So for this we do let justify content. Looking good. And bottom right.
Yeah, this is
So
something that I'm quite familiar with.
the color use. I'm going to convert this into an array and I've also been running my Android emulator in the background. Cool, and it's working on Android as well. One thing to notice that colors look a little bit different between Android and iOS, and sometimes that's just how it is. There's nothing to do about it. We're literally using the same hex codes, so that's something to be wary of. I've had to change color values just for Android, just to make sure that it looks good, especially greens for some reason. So that's something to be wary of. Right, let's look at the solution and make sure I've covered everything. If for some reason you fall behind, I know I type quite quickly, so if you fell behind or you're a little bit confused, feel free to click on these links, and this should have all the diff of usually you figure out one place to set the font, but then that thing is used in multiple components. Right, let's look at the solution for this styling exercise. Right, so first thing we have some text. There are some boxes of different colors, so I'm going to edit the text.
But I think there is some missing one.
I'm making a conscious effort not to type the U. And you notice that the text is quite a bit bolder here. So we're going to add a text style. Let's do so the default font size is 16, I think. Let's do 18. Cool. And because I got rid of our styles for the view, our text is touching the end of the screen again, so I'm gonna just add some
There you got it.
padding.
Much better, as well as the style here for ourselves, which is this.
That's good. And I think I'm going to add some padding to the top as well, because this isn't at the top of the screen. Let's do padding top 40. Cool. Alright. Now,
And you throw an error.
now, because this is just an area
Okay,
that you want
no
to style,
problem.
the best thing to use, the only thing to use really is a view. So I'm going to just add a view here. And I'm going to add some text inside.
Alright. Yeah, but it's not that hard. It has something that you need to remember. It's just something that you need to remember for that.
And sometimes that's just how it is. There's nothing. This should have all the different
So with that, that'll be all for this video. As you can see here, this is the end result of our app. Yep, this is the end result. This is on Android, which is awesome, cool. And alright, so that'll be all for the video. Take care.